The spotlight was blinding, casting Katarina's slender form in harsh whites and blacks as she moved across the stage. At 32 years old, she was in her prime as a ballet dancer, her movements fluid and graceful, honed by decades of discipline and practice. Yet as she danced the lead role of Odette in Swan Lake for what felt like the 1000th time, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A tightness had settled into her limbs, a dull ache residing in her joints no matter how thoroughly she stretched and warmed up. As she launched herself into a series of fouette turns, her world tilted dizzyingly. She fought to control the dizzying spin, focusing every fiber of her being into maintaining her form. But her body wouldn't cooperate, seemed to be actively rebelling against the movements she knew so intimately. On the final turn, her knee buckled and she crumpled to the stage in an undignified heap. A crimson stain bloomed across the front of her tutu as the audience collectively gasped. For one frozen moment, Katarina simply stared dumbly at the blood wicking through the white fabric. Then the pain hit, a searing line of fire shooting through her knee, whiting out all her senses. With that sickening crack of her knee giving way, Katarina's brilliant career as a prima ballerina came to an abrupt and unceremonious end. Lying on the stage amid the dust and ghosts of dancers past, she felt something inside her wither and die too. Dance was not just her profession. It was her life's breath, her reason for living. Without it, who was she? It took weeks before the doctors could put a name to the injury, a classic ballet trauma known as a dancer's hip. Years of repeatedly forcing turnovers and extreme leg rotations had ground away the cartilage and bone, until one wrong move caused everything to shatter. Even more devastating was the prognosis. She would likely never dance again, not at a professional level. At best, she might recover enough mobility to teach dance to children. The words were a death sentence, shattering all of Katarina's ambitions and dreams for the future. Dance was not just her passion, but her identity. Those hard years of poverty as a child, forgoing birthdays and treats so her parents could scrimp together enough for dance lessons, long nights spent giving herself blistered feet in pursuit of perfection, all of it lost in a single cruel twist of fate. Worse, her very sense of self was inextricably tied to being a dancer. She struggled to understand who she was without it. Lying in her apartment, staring at the bars installed along the walls where she used to relentlessly drill her technique, she found she couldn't picture a life for herself outside the world of dance. What was she supposed to do now that her body had quite literally failed her? We all reach the end of the road someday. Her dance instructor had always told her with a melancholy smile, "Savor each pirouette, because it may be your last." At the time, the blithe words rolled off Katarina. She was too ambitious, too focused, too young and full of dreams to consider her art might have an expiration date. Now those words echoed through her mind like a curse. Worst of all, she couldn't shake the fear that her injury was a sign, a thundering message from the universe that her body was wearing out, that her best days were behind her forever. Though still relatively young, what if this was the first sputtering of the inevitable decline as she aged? If her ability to dance had deserted her once, how could she ever trust it not to leave her again? The future she had taken for granted had crumbled into dust. The idea of going back, of clinging to the phages of the world of dance as a teacher or choreographer, felt somehow obscene. To have that dream daily in her face, just out of reach, it would be its own private torment. She knew in her bones she didn't have the strength. So at 32 years old, Katarina turned a nova experience most dancers twice her age never face, having to start over and find a new identity, a new path forward. With a heaviness in her heart, she packed away her leotards and slippers, carefully stored away the body she had pushed to its limits in a vain attempt at perfection. Her high-rise apartment felt like a mausoleum with its empty practice spaces, reminding her of everything she had lost. On an impulse, she sold it and used the money to buy a rundown but affordable cottage out in the countryside near the town of her childhood. Perhaps some psychological distance from her former life could help ease the pain of having it torn away. Quaint and pretty, the cottage sat in a rolling meadow full of waving grass and weather-beaten oaks. A cheerful stream cut through the backyard, bubbling over rocks worn smooth as river stones. Wildflowers swayed in the warm breeze, while birds swooped and darted through the trees in a kaleidoscope of bright plumages. In the quiet and tranquil surroundings, Katerina gradually began to find some semblance of inner peace. Mornings, she practiced gentle stretches and routines designed to regain mobility in her damaged knee. Too much exertion, though, would leave her angrily sweating and gritting her teeth against the flare of pain. So she spent long afternoons wandering the property, rediscovering the simple pleasures she denied herself in her single-minded pursuit of dance. She learned to recognize bird calls, to spot the first flowers of spring peeking through the frost, and the changing leaves of autumn in their vibrant palette of reds and golds. Just being present in those small moments brought her joy. And being surrounded by the ceaseless dance of nature, clouds passing overhead, grasses swaying in the wind, helped ease a different sort of longing in her soul. As the pain began to subside and her knee slowly regained some functionality, Katerina began to cautiously spread her wings. She found work at a local diner, bussing tables and washing dishes. Initially, she fiercely guarded her privacy, fearful her coworkers would recognize her if she revealed her former career. But the hard work and human connection of keeping a diner running like a well-oiled machine gradually grew on her. She came to relish the callous camaraderie of shouted orders, clinking plates and spraying water as the team danced through a busy shift. It was a new kind of choreography, an improvised art all its own, with each player bringing their own unique skill set to create a cohesive whole. And over amicable beers shared after work, Katerina found herself sharing bits and pieces of her life, opening up to these new friends in ways she never imagined possible. There was a bakery owner who designed ornate gowns in her youth, sparking Katerina to reflect on her first tutu. A line cook who toured with a rock band as a lighting tech, living the gypsy lifestyle from truck stop to arena, and a waitress studying engineering at night. Her passion for the elegance and precision of science and math reflected in Katerina's own dedication to dance. She became enthralled by their stories, feeling kinship in their single-minded ambitions, and the way each sacrifice and setback was simply a stepping stone on the road to achieving their dreams. A new path, a new perspective, had opened before her when the old way became blocked. More and more, Katerina came to relish her humble new existence. There was a kind of rough beauty and integrity to it, a freedom from the constraints of pretense and expectation. She could simply exist in the moment, drink in the quiet pleasure of good company, good food, and good beer. When her co-workers inevitably recognized her from her former career and prodded her for stories of the ballet, she found herself reflecting fondly on those memories she once feared would become a source of torment. Without the pressure to perform, she could appreciate all the passion and glory of that existence free from bitterness over its loss. And by allowing herself to look back and reflect, she slowly started to imagine a path back to her primordial love of dance and music, not on the stage, but as a part of life. One afternoon, lost in a nostalgic revelry over the opera scores that once scored her greatest performances, she had an impulse she couldn't resist. Limping slightly on her bad knee, she eased herself down in a patch of sunlight warming the wooden floor. Settling into a cross-legged pose, she closed her eyes and began to move. Slowly at first, wincing at the twinges of pain, but loosening into flowing gestures and stretches as the music washed over her. This was not a rehearsed and precise dance, but a raw expression of her innermost emotions and the profound joy of being able to move freely, without strictures or expectations. She was not a performer any longer, but neither was she defined by her trauma and the voice in her head, whispering bitter recriminations about time lost, shows missed, perfection forsaken. By shutting out the external world and listening only to the music catalyzing her movements, she experienced a hard-won grace, a reconciliation between the part of her aching with the loss of her life's dream and the part that recognized there were still so many more dances to discover. When the diner staff came in the next morning to find Katerina fast asleep amid the remnants of her personal ballet, they assumed she simply fell asleep to the music as usual. Only Katerina knew the full truth, that this dance was not the futile clinging to a fading glory, but the first step on a new journey. In the months that followed, she began teaching a children's dance and movement class out of the back room at the diner. More and more, She felt her passions realigning as she taught her students to interpret the turnings of the seasons, the majesty of thunderstorms, and the soulful melancholy of rain on a city night through movement. No longer boxed into the strict guidelines of the ballet canon, her choreography became more freeform and experimental. She drew from modern dance, improvisation, gymnastics routines, and simple childlike gestures and games. Her students learned self-expression and emotional catharsis through dance, the way she had as a girl before the weight of ambition was draped over her childlike joy. In those dances, tracing the path of a monarch butterfly wending its way north, following the cycle of life from birth through death and renewal once more, Katarina discovered peace. She forged her identity anew through her art, not as a performer or a professional, but as a vessel for the revelation of the beauty inherent in every human movement. And when her knee inevitably flared up from overexertion, she learned to relish the reminder of what came before and be grateful for all she had accomplished. Like the turns of the seasons she so loved to celebrate, each transition was part of a natural cycle more profound than the tiny boxes humans erected around themselves. Years passed in this gentle, sublime way. Katarina's dance company grew, moving into a proper studio, until she had a full roster of classes and students spanning from toddlers to seniors. She became a wondrously popular instructor, beloved for her kindness, patience, and the ecstatic expressiveness of her choreography. In time, her greatest joy became not choreographing intricate and showy pieces, but simply observing the way her students inhabited different rhythms and cadences. She would watch, enraptured, as a precocious 6-year-old solemnly traced the eternal cycle of light dappling through tree leaves over the changing seasons in a series of precise hand gestures, or an elderly man with a stooped spine and gnarled fingers decomposing music into pure momentum and kinetic energy in ways that defied classical technique. For the first time since her fateful injury, she felt free from the constraints of form and structure. Her entire worldview expanded to encompass the purest expression of dance as a viscerally emotional language everyone could speak. It was a transcendent philosophy she hoped to share with as many people as possible, no matter their skill level or physical ability. So as her students came and went, transitioning from her dance education into their own paths and callings, Katarina found herself reflecting on how she might preserve her teachings for posterity before her own dance came to an end. When she was ultimately forced to undergo surgery to mitigate the increasing pain in her knee, did she decide the time was right. She gradually phased out her hands-on teaching in favor of long hours spent writing about her methods, the philosophy undergirding her dance of life choreography, even sprinkling in cherished childhood stories that originally inspired her love of the art. She penned an extensive treatise that intertwined autobiographical memories with intricate dance notation and photographic references. What began as a straightforward guide for other instructors gradually became a sprawling, poetic manifesto on the human experience traced through movement. Those long months of intense writing and revision gave Katarina a new artistic rebirth. Though slowed by her injuries, she nevertheless danced through the act of creation itself. The process of shaping language with the same intensity she once shaped her form into perfect arabesques sparked in her a new appreciation for the enduring power of art. The day came at last when she assembled her final revisions on the backroom computer at the diner where her dance renaissance first began. It seemed only fitting to send her manuscript to publishers from the same humble space where she first began improvising dances inspired by the chirping birds outside the windows. As she clicked send on her email and launched her treatise out into the world, she felt a great weight lift from her chest and dissipate like fog burning off over her favorite meadow. Katarina leaned back in her chair, sipping a mug of tea, and simply let herself breathe deeply. At 62 years old, she had overcome the soul-shattering trauma of her injured knee and achieved a new awakening. Finally, she felt free to put the dance of her lifetime into its eternal rest, confident she had discharged her responsibility to share her passion with the world. The sun streamed through the patio doors, casting warm rays on Katarina's face. She closed her eyes and sank into the comforting heat. At peace, she flowed gracefully through one final, spontaneous dance that transcended all technique or form. For in that perfect stillness, she at last understood her dance would never end until the day she drew her very last breath. It was the eternal rhythm of life made manifest through every heartbeat and inhalation, translated into the symphony of limbs tracing its cadence.